I mean, Richard Strauss, the composer, said every man is struggling, everybody's struggling. So when we're aware of that, just work with your heart and things will happen. Magic happens in the therapy room. Suddenly, the upper part of my body was pulled upwards off the earth, and something left my body out of the left shoulder and went, and I crumpled back down on the earth again. And I thought, what the hell was that?
Welcome to the Past Life Awakening Institute podcast. I'm your host, Mark Beale. I'm a past life regression therapist, trainer, and an author. And today, my guest is Steve Burgess. He's also a past life regressionist, hypnotherapist, trainer, and an author. And now he has a new book called The Adventures of a Hypnotherapist. And full disclosure, we both actually have the same publisher. And our books are both coming out at the end of May in the UK and the beginning of June in the US. So you can click through to the links to see these books. Now, today with Steve, it's an interesting conversation where we cover hypnosis and hypnotherapy and what it can do when it's done to the fullest extent. We'll also look at how he got into past lives, some of his own past lives, the role of wisdom traditions, spirit attachment, and the process of training and learning to be a hypnotherapist, to have this adventure as a lifelong profession. So thanks for watching and enjoy this podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Steve. Great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's great to be on the show with a fellow professional.
All right. Yeah, we've got a lot in common. You know what? I don't know if I told you this, but I created a video about 6 months ago on my channel, which is 25 past life regression must-read books. And I included The Power of Past Life Regression on that list.
Oh, thank you.
And so that book is quite focused on past life regression case studies. And so that book's been out 5 years now, and you're following it up with a new book, The Adventures of a Hypnotherapist. So I guess now, reading the book, I know you're using hypnotherapist as an umbrella term, as you cover a pretty wide range of topics. So can you describe the approach you've taken with this new book?
Yeah, I've tried as best I can to do a variety of things in it, to give a good lot of insights into the type of work that I've done over the last 33 years as a hypnotherapist and as a regression-based therapist. And what I'm hoping to do is that the reader will be in turns shocked, amazed, intrigued, amused, because I've done my best to bring quite a bit of humor into it, as well as fascinated by the broad spread of stuff that we can do in the hypnotherapy game, and especially in the regression profession. So that was my aim, and fingers crossed. And the reviews I've been getting from people who've read the book in advance of publication are saying the nicest things. I think I've succeeded.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that comes across. You've really taken a broad approach to a lot of things that can happen, and a lot can happen in hypnotherapy. So I'm curious, and so there is that sense of fascination. A lot of people are fascinated by hypnosis and hypnotherapy, but they don't go ahead and train in it. And so what was it that drew you towards the subconscious mind in the first place?
Initially, I think it was because of my experience as a practicing Buddhist, and like yourself, heavily involved in Tibetan Buddhism for a number of years. And knowing initially how meditation, just simple daily breathing meditation, changed me as a person. And of course, as we both know, meditation and hypnosis are both trance states. I tend to say hypnosis and meditation are sisters. And so when we're doing meditation, we are in a form of altered state, a trance state. And for me, what happened is I'd been meditating very deeply for a number of months. And one day my wife said to me, she said, "You've changed, Burgess." And I said, "No, I haven't. What do you mean?" Because in those days I was a typical clever dick male, nothing wrong with me. And she said, "You've changed." She said, you're not as angry as you used to be. And I said, what do you mean angry? I didn't think I was very angry. I thought, hang on, yeah, I'm a lot softer nowadays. I feel softer and it's the meditation that has done it. So that sort of stayed with me. But it was really quite by accident that I became a hypnotherapist. And for a number of years, I was a director of a publishing company, which went bust and took some of my money with it. And I had to sort of do something quickly. And my dad had been playing with hypnotherapy for a while. And what had happened is he'd been a smoker all of his life. And he tried everything to stop smoking. Nothing had worked. And one day somebody, chortling into their sleeve said, "Why don't you go and see a hypnotherapist?" Smirk, smirk. Because, of course, as we all know, hypnotherapy is one of the best ways, if not the best way, to help people to stop smoking. So my dad went to this fellow in England, and this chap talked to him and laid him in a comfortable chair and relaxed him for a while. And my dad, at the end of that session, didn't want a cigarette anymore. And that did not make sense. My father is a scientist by profession, and his left brain just didn't get this. It didn't make sense. How was it that this chap had just relaxed him and told him to let go of smoking and cigarettes, and he was now a non-smoker? So he started to read up about hypnosis, and the more he read, the more fascinated he became, until he went and trained with the fella who'd stopped him smoking, helped him to stop smoking, and trained in hypnotherapy, and started using it as a hobby. And he was just playing with it with friends and family and people that he knew. And so when the publishing company went down, he said, "Why don't you look at being a hypnotherapist?" And I thought, okay, it probably is easier than working for a living, which it isn't. I went and got trained, and my initial training was pretty crap, in all honesty. So after about 6 months, I went and retrained with a chap called Wilf Proudfoot in the north of England, and Wilf really became my mentor. And it was I was very lucky. Like some people are natural therapists, like some people are natural footballers or natural musicians. I'm just a natural therapist, so it just felt like coming home, and I've never looked back since.
Ooh. Yeah, it's interesting that it was your father's experience that got you interested and not your own. It often starts.
It was by accident in a way. Having said that, when I was 16, I was struggling at a new school, and I did have some hypnotherapy sessions back then, 15 I think I was, really to sort of build confidence and to help with anxieties. And that was just really basic hypnotherapy. The therapist just guided me into relaxation and gave me hypnotic suggestions that I'd be stronger, etc. So I think that my initial experience of hypnotherapy goes back a long way, because obviously I'm 108 years old now. So it goes back a long way. So I think I knew that it wasn't anything to be scared of. It was just an experiential sort of therapeutic approach. And it's wonderful as a profession.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even say the initial training you had was fairly basic. And even the initial experiences, we now probably look at them as fairly basic or foundational. Because I remember, back in the 90s, you'd think hypnotherapy, hypnosis, it's smoking, weight loss, confidence, that's it. Phobias, that's it. And and it's even interesting that it's your dad did that, not you, because it is that generation of smokers is a lot less, but also that approach of hypnotherapy. And you think, well, once people stop smoking, hypnotherapy is gone. Yeah, but now you're really focusing on more complex hypnotherapy and regression and trauma-based work. And so how have you noticed that evolution of the field as you've been in it for all these years?
Yeah, I mean, it's 33 years now, and I've seen a dramatic change, I think, in the hypnotherapy profession. As you say, back then in the early 90s, it was much more basic, using what we call post-hypnotic suggestion therapy and visualizations, get the client into a gentle trance or a deep trance and do all sorts of stuff to get them to think differently and aim to reprogram the subconscious. And nowadays, the regression world is just alive. I mean, it has exploded. In the last 10, 15 years, it's been an enormous explosion. Of course, that's primarily, I believe, because of the internet, because so much content is now available on the internet, but also because of people like Dolores Cannon, who has been very much out there before she died in terms of, getting past life regression as a well-known sort of subject. So for me, I still say past life regression is of age now. It is coming of age. 33 years ago, I had to justify past life regression, and people thought I was woo-woo quite often. Nowadays, I don't even have to justify it. People are contacting me from all around the world for regression sessions. They know it works. They are fascinated. And I think we're moving into a really wonderful new age in terms of sort of the way that therapy is going.
Yeah, and it's people understanding what it can do. So I remember, 20 years ago when I was starting, that people would come and say, I just booked you in for a basic session on confidence or something. But now that I've had that session, I realize you can do so much more. So now I'm going to go through some of these deep, heavy emotions that I've been carrying and then carry on. So, and that's something that you lead with in the book, The Adventures of a Hypnotherapist. You come straight out with a multi-chapter case study with Emma, and you mentioned as well that hypnotherapy isn't a one-off or past lives. Sometimes people even see them as a kind of a one-off novelty. Who was I? Have a giggle, like seeing a psychic who tells you a few things, and then you think nothing more of it. A bit of fun. But you talk about it as being like serious, real therapy, and then you give a great example of that where someone comes in with 6 months to live and you're like, okay, do I take this? And so can you tell us a bit about that case study?
Yeah, sure. Just before I say that, I should preface it that for me, regression and past life regression is the deepest form of therapy I believe is available. I really believe that. It's deeper and more far reaching and more effective than any other therapy which is around on earth right now. I truly believe that. So, the regression model is that all of our issues are caused by locked in emotions from past traumas. And that's the model within which you and I work. I know you have your flavor of working with your clients. I have my flavor of working. But what we're aiming to do more often than not in regression, and in your book as well, and I obviously read your new book and it's brilliant. I was really pleased to meet you as well as a fellow professional who knows what he's doing. Yes, we both have different qualities and different recipes, if you like, for our ways of working. We're both chefs,
Yeah.
and we're both doing the same sort of wonderful cuisine, but we both have our own spices and herbs in our recipes, which are different, but it's the same overall recipe. So your work is brilliant. I love reading your book. So for people who are listening to us, this is a mutual admiration society. Excuse me. So Emma, she came to me. She'd been given 6 months to live. She had a very aggressive liver disease called focal nodular hyperplasia. Very unusual. There's only about 12 cases in the UK at any one time, and hers was the most aggressive. No one survives this particular disease. Now, what it's about, tumours grow on the liver, and the tumours are not cancerous, but they grow to such a size that the size of sort of grapefruits and lemons and what have you. And she had a whole fruit salad down there around her liver. So these tumours were growing bigger and bigger. What happens is they then push all the inner organs out of place. They suppress the liver function. She was in pain 24 hours a day. And she had to be helped to my office because she couldn't walk up the stairs. And she sat in front of me and she looked like a stick insect. She was a lovely looking, I think, probably 40-year-old woman, something like that, 38-year-old woman. But she'd lost bucketfuls of weight. She'd had to give up work. She spent most of the day in pain laying on a sofa. She was doped up to the eyeballs on morphine. She had a young daughter who she couldn't do anything with. And her specialist, he tried a lot of things with her, but eventually he gave up. He said, I'm sorry, go away and write your will. I'm guessing you've got about 6 months to live. So when she sat in front of me and she said, you're my last hope, it's one of those, for us therapists, one of those oh shit moments. Oh shit, this is big stuff. This is heavy stuff. And I was very fortunate, as we both know, some people are naturally hypnotizable. And she was very good in trance. So I guided her into trance, having done a very deep history taking the first session, and she went into trance beautifully. Did some general work. She came out of trance in that first session, and the pain had reduced from 10 out of 10 to 2 out of 10. And she looked lighter, she looked brighter, she could stand up, she could walk around on her own. And that was the start of the therapy. And that was then the start of working on the emotional root causes of that liver disease. And the liver, of course, is the seat of anger. And when we're working in therapy, we're working to release any one or more of the 5 root negative emotions: anger, sadness, fear, anxiety, and guilt. And obviously, there was a lot of anger in her. She had a tough childhood. There were 2 past lives as well that were causing the disease. In one of the past lives, she was a Native American squaw who was stabbed by a raiding party on her village and killed. And of course, the dagger went in the back of her as she was dragged backwards by a brave. She was stabbed in the liver area and died. In the other past life, she was a young Polish teenage boy in the Second World War who was bayoneted to death, or bayoneted by Nazis again in the liver area, and then thrown into a river to die. So that was part of the work that we did along the way over quite a lot of sessions. After that first session, she came back a week later, and she'd stopped taking morphine. She didn't need it anymore. So she could start to get her life back, because morphine just drugs you up, and she didn't know where she was. And so we did a lot of work to heal. The tumor stopped growing. She got stronger and stronger. She was able to eat, because most of the time she couldn't eat. She just vomited most of the time if she ate anything. And she got to the stage where she became so strong that her surgeon, her specialist, wanted to do surgery with her, which he'd done twice before, and it had failed both times, because she had to drink a dye down, so that when he's working, trying to thread a plastic tube up the blood vessels to the liver, to the tumors, she was very allergic to many things, and the dye was just making her sick all the time. So she was having this surgery while she's vomiting, and he's trying to do a delicate operation. It was a disaster both times. The first time he damaged the liver itself, and the second time he damaged the gallbladder. She had to have a gallbladder removed. But he thought, well, he's desperate. Let's try the operation again. Now you're a lot stronger. And as she sat in front of me and told me that he wanted to do the surgery, words came out of my mouth, and I'm still a bit gobsmacked as to where these words came from. They said, "We'll do the operation in hypnosis." And then I realized I'd said that to her. Another oh shit moment. Oh shit, what have I done? I've not been trained in hypnosurgery. So I've done some brilliant pain management work over the years based on Dr. Escudero's work, the Spanish surgeon who does all of his operations without any anesthetic. So I knew I could hopefully do it. But the surgeon agreed, to much to my surprise. And we did the whole operation in trance with no anesthesia. The previous 2 times it had taken 2.5 hours to do, and she was in hospital for weeks afterwards. This time it took 90 minutes. She didn't move once. I was in surgery all the way through with her. Anybody reading the book will read a bit more about my personal experiences in that surgery, because I don't like blood. At the end of the surgery, she was out of hospital 2 days later, and the surgeon just turned to me and he said, "I've never seen anything like this in my life." He said it was like operating on a dead body. There were no defensive reflexes in any way, shape, or form. "I need to talk to you about this. Give me one of your cards and I'll give you a call." Well, I'm still waiting for that telephone call 29 years later, but fortunately that lady is now 29 years past her die-by date. So just as an example of the power of the subconscious, how extraordinary it really is, and the amazing things that we see as hypnotherapists.
Yeah, it is really an extraordinary case, and I love it particularly in that it illustrates so many elements of hypnosis. So we know, as we read our history, James Baird and was doing hypnoanesthesia in the surgery, so they say, on the battlefields. But, it sort of seems mythical.
Yes.
And then you're not just stopping there. You're not placing a limit on the modality or the subconscious. You're then going into past lives. How did you get involved in past life regression and find that to be something that's useful to add into what's going to create a really long-term solution?
Yeah. Again, it was by accident. So I've been working as a standard, normal, ordinary hypnotherapist for, excuse me, I think about 9 months or so. And just using suggestion work, visualizations. I knew it wasn't, there was more to therapy than that. I was trying to find a way through, and I was experimenting with different things. But one day, a young fella came into me, into the office. He was about 24 years old, and he had still now one of the most severe anxiety states that I have seen in all of my career. And he sat in front of me and he was shaking. His body was shaking. He was hyperventilating as he was sharing his story with me. He was stuttering. He couldn't get his words out. He was looking all over the place. You know, his eyes were everywhere. And I said to him, "So how long have you had this for?" He said, I've always been a worrier. I mean, as we know as regression therapists, one of the first questions we ask is, what's the issue? Tell me about the issue. And the second question is, how long have you had it for? So how long have you been like this for? I said, well, all my life I've been a worrier. Even at school, I was a worrier. But it's got worse and worse and worse. So now it's as bad as this. He said it got worse when the children came along. But he said, I can't work. I've had to give my job up. The doctor keeps giving me tablets, which are making things worse. And as we know so many times, antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety drugs make things worse. So, he said, my wife's sick of it. I sit at home all day shaking. There's no life for us and the kids. And she said that if I don't get this sorted, she'll divorce me. So, okay, any causes to this? Tell me about your childhood. Was it happy or unhappy? It was okay. And there were no significant emotional events in his earlier life that could account for this. Even his birth, he said his birth was okay. So I said, okay. So I guided him into hypnosis and took him into trance. And in those days, we're still reading the scripts, and as we all do as hypnotherapists, well, most of us anyway, to start with until you get the words in your head. And I'm just guiding him through a nice induction and a deepener and taking him into a beautiful place in nature. And he relaxed beautifully. He just went. I think all of that tension has been there for so long. When I gave him permission to relax, as we know, a lot of therapy is about just giving people permission to change. It's great for our egos when we remember that. So, I got this client better. Actually, I just gave them permission to change. So I gave him permission to relax, and he did. And I'm thinking, I'm on a winner here. This is fantastic. All the signs of trance were there. His body was limp. It's totally loose. His breathing was slow. Cheeks a little bit reddened, etc., etc. And I was well into this, and about 10, 15 minutes into my scripts, thinking, this is great. And then all of a sudden, without any warning, his body started to shake. And his whole body started to shake. And the next thing is moving around in the chair, and he's breathing, and he starts to whisper, no, hide. They're coming, hide. They're coming. And I'm looking at my script thinking, it's not in the script. I said, no, hide in here, quickly. Shh. Quiet, they're coming, quickly. And then all of a sudden he started to scream and yell and writhe, and his body's flying around. No, not the children. No. And it was 100, 1,000 times bigger than that, Mark. It really was. And then he just slumped in the chair. And I'm thinking, what is this? And then he just was relaxed. I said, how do you feel? He said, I feel wonderful. I feel absolutely wonderful. I have never felt this calm in the whole of my life. I feel absolutely amazing. And I thought, well, I bloody don't. My heart was banging away. I've never seen this before. I said, what was happening? He said, it was weird. I was a man in another body in another time. There were soldiers, the Nazis, trying to find me and the children. We were hiding. We tried to hide and they found us and they shot us all to death. What was that about? He said. I said, well, I think you've been in a past life. I mean, obviously I knew about past lives, but I'm not trained in them. So how do you feel? He said, I feel amazing. And his anxiety state was cured in 10, 15 minutes, Mark. Just absolutely cured. And I just thought, why don't I know about this? This is significant. So I got in touch with the American Past Life Association, got hold of some scripts from over there, started to play with it. Was very fortunate in my training in that I went and trained with Ernest Rossi, who was the great acolyte of Milton Erickson, who uses the subconscious in a different way, lets the subconscious do the work, uses ideomotor response, and it changed my career. And from then on, I've created a regression system, as you've created your regression system, which is so effective and so powerful. And we see these experiences many, many times.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story and an amazing introduction. And the funny thing is, I've got a story very similar to that in my book, where it's you've got an army invading, killing the person. She was actually witnessing all the people being killed. She survived, but it's the same thing. And she's sobbing, crying, abreacting. And when you're sitting there, for the first time it happens, you're sitting there thinking, oh dear. But as you get used to it, you become very at peace with it, because the secret is, and even as you're telling that story and acting it out, people might think, I don't want that. I don't want to recall, the worst traumas that I could imagine. But the punchline that we must remember is, now I feel amazing. Now I feel better than I've ever felt before in my life. And that is the lesson to take from it. And that's exactly what I experience in a lot of ways and just see time and time again. So when people go into death trauma, so it's like, what trauma do you go into? It's like, well, as bad as it can be, because that means they feel as good as they can possibly feel, more than they ever knew was possible. And and that's just the miraculous counterintuitive element of this work, which makes, it's so beautiful.
I would say that at least 60% of past life regression therapy is death trauma, is releasing death trauma, for me anyway. And it takes guts to do this work, Mark. When I train my therapists in regression in my system, it takes guts to sit there when your client is right. It doesn't happen that often. I mean, okay, it does happen, but it's not every day. It's not every week. But we get the big releases sometimes. We see lots of emotion, of course we do. We see lots of crying. But when my client is in that state, I am going, yes. Inside, a part of me is going, yes, this is getting you better. This will get you better. So stay with it. But it does take courage to do it as a therapist, and the client as well, of course. I admire all of my clients who are prepared to do this work, because it is so deep and it's not fun. I say that to clients very often. This is not meant to be fun, but it is effective. And if we can dig those roots out, the problem is like a weed that's growing up, and many therapies just chop the weed down. Of course, what often happens is then the weed carries on growing, or it comes out in a different way. With regression, we're digging the roots out and the damn thing doesn't grow back again. So when we're able to do that, I'm celebrating inside. And as we both know, there are some clients who don't want to do it, don't like to do it. I just say, tough, sorry, we've got to do it. Let's get in there. Virginia Satir, the great family therapist, who was one of my mentor's best friends. So we were trained in a lot of Virginia Satirisms. Nobody dies from crying, she says. And that's awesome. Sorry, we're going to say.
Yeah, well, I sort of have a step where I tell my clients, we're going to go back and get some resources. I'm going to regress you. I'm going to ask you to feel good, and you'll feel good. And then they build up confidence and faith that it's not that scary, it's not that bad. It's kind of fun to do hypnosis, because I ask them to feel good, they feel good, they remember resources. Then I come back and I say, well, I asked you to feel good last time and you felt good. Today I'm going to ask you to feel really bad, and you're going to feel 10 times better than you did when I asked you to feel good.
Right.
And they kind of believe me, because I delivered on feeling good, but then I take them into the darkest things, but you go to the dark to go through it and beyond it and get to the brightest light you've ever known. So
exactly. Yeah,
don't get hung
yeah,
up and stuck on the dark. Go to it, through it, beyond
absolutely.
it, and it's pure
Yeah,
light after that.
yeah. I like your analogy in the book of moving down a dark tunnel, and as the darkness is going behind you, you're getting closer to the light. And that's
Yeah.
very much the case. Yeah.
But you're so right about the courage that it takes. It's interesting. It sounds like you had exposure to meditation before you got into hypnosis. Was that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So when I was,
Yeah,
practicing as a Buddhist for all those years, and I think also looking at life from a Buddhist perspective, it makes you a better therapist, I think.
I agree. And I think if I had not had exposure to meditation practice, I would not have become a past life therapist. And also, I wouldn't have been able to be so peaceful in the face of people's dualistically very bad trauma.
Yes, yeah,
Can you
yeah.
talk a little bit about what that wisdom tradition foundation meant for you as a therapist?
Yeah, thank you. And just before I do that, I added that chapter plus the other chapter about my initial experience in therapy when on
Mm,
a training course I was demoed on by Wilf Proudfoot at the
yeah,
front of the group, and it changed my life. And prior to that, I thought there's nothing wrong with me. I don't have any issues. So
yeah.
I added two chapters in which were one of my team members. She said she liked the book, but there's not enough of you in it, Burgess. So I said, okay, so I added those two, and I think it gives it a lot more balance. It isn't just me
Mm,
reporting my cases as I've done in the previous two books. It
mm,
actually gives a sense of who I am. And there's a couple of things there. So just before talking about meditation and sort of wisdom, the other thing is that very few therapists have therapy themselves. And it's the old psychiatrist and psychology stuff. There's nothing wrong with me. You're the problem, Mr. Client, and I am helping you. We've all got issues. And I believe that the best therapists have done work on themselves and are prepared to do work on themselves. So I know for you as a trainer and a lot of people listening to this are your students, have therapy. Don't just think that I'm the clever dick, there's nothing wrong with me, because it makes you a better therapist. It gives you a much better idea of how it is to be in trance, how it is to go through stuff, which helps you to empathize with your clients more. But more than that, if it's good therapy, it gets rid of some of your shit and let go of your shit. Change, become more balanced, because the more balanced that you are, the better you are for your clients, and a better role model as well, I believe, as well. So, but from the sort of perspective of meditation and wisdom, etc., one thing that strikes me about that, maybe just not quite answering your question, but which comes to me, is that I went through a sort of a spiritual process after being a Buddhist for many years. I fell out of favor with it because I felt it was too religious, and especially Tibetan Buddhism. And I felt there were elements which did not suit me. And you talk about cultural elements of Tibetan Buddhism. I know you said that, which, deities and things like that. I mean, where is this coming from? And it didn't suit me. And I sort of fell out of favor and moved into Native American shamanism. So I did some training in shamanism. And we did all sorts of things in the shamanistic training. Obviously, we were working with nature, etc., etc. But we're doing all sorts of ceremonies and rituals. I mean, I've done so many sweat lodges. I'm surprised my skin isn't red raw all the time, because being in a sweat lodge for a couple of hours at a time is really exhausting, but a very powerful ritual. And one of the rituals we did was called making an ally of death. And the idea is we had to dig our own grave, and then 6 feet down, 2 meters down, in the English countryside, in this farm, this old farm we used to do our ceremonies on. We're all over the place in the hills around the farm. And then we had to spend the night in the grave. So there were planks put over the grave. We had a small opening with which to slide down. And then they put a plank over that and a tarpaulin and put soil over the top. So you were really sealed in apart from a bit of air. And you were in pitch darkness all night long. And we had a ceremony to do, a ritual to do in there. And what happened for me is I spent several hours, and it was actually very comforting. I thought I'd be scared to death, but it's very comforting being in. It was felt like being held by Mother Earth. It was very beautiful, but it was weird. And I spent several hours doing this ceremony, and I would guess it was about 2 or 3 in the morning. And I felt that there was still something that I needed to do. I'd done the ceremony, but it wasn't complete. So I laid down, and bear in mind I'd been sitting, for all of that time. But I laid down, and I went into trance, and I went into some sort of past life. Now, I don't see anything. I'm non-visual. So my past lives are very kinesthetic. My body moves and I release stuff. And I get an intuitive sense of what's in the past life. And I did some releasing, and I thought, and after a little while, I thought, that feels better. I've let go of something. And then suddenly I could hear voices chanting and drumming. And at this stage, I thought I'd really lost the plot. And then I realized it was the facilitators of the rituals over the weekend who were coming around our graves and chanting and singing and drumming. And as that was happening, suddenly the upper part of my body was pulled upwards off the earth, and something left my body out of the left shoulder and went, and I crumpled back down on the earth again. And I thought, what the hell was that? And then I realized it had been a spirit attachment, which I didn't know I'd had. And a combination of doing the ritual, my releasing, and the drumming and chanting had made it feel too uncomfortable to stay around anymore. So it had buggered off. So that side of things, that moved me on again as a therapist. And then I fell into non-duality and non-duality teachings. And that all was meant to be. So that, it's strange. And what I'm leading up to is how many of my clients nowadays are moving towards, as a result of their therapy and the healings, they start to talk in terms of non-dualistic principles and non-dualistic philosophy without realizing what it is. And I'm able to share with them a little bit about that. There's no good, there's no bad, there's no right, there's no wrong. There just is. This idea everything is perfect. I came through this from the Zen perspective. Other people come from an Eastern tradition, like Rupert Spira, the great non-duality teacher from England. His was an Eastern background. So, and it's wonderful because that gives me comfort, helps me to stay more at peace and more level-headed. I'm able to share that with my clients, and some of them then go on and start looking at non-duality teachings. And there's real beauty in that. I'm not trying to be religious or anything like that. I'm just sharing a bit of some ideas with them, and many of them take that on board.
Yeah, that's a really interesting sequence. And I also had a background in Tibetan Buddhism. But one of the things, and as I meditated, I felt very comfortable and familiar with meditation, and recalled that I've been a Tibetan Buddhist monk in a past life. But as time went on, I realized, yet I'm not born a Tibetan in this life. Hence, some of the cultural things and spices that they add in just don't fit. And that's okay, because that was part of an influence I needed for a series of years. And then and then different things happen in your life. And so that's kind of what happened with you. You were drawn towards Tibetan Buddhism. You went on retreats. You're going to places in Scotland you talk about in the book, and meeting lamas, etc. So I think anytime we meet a spiritually advanced person, it helps us and moves us perhaps to the next step that we need to be, which may be away from what's given us that impetus, but moves us on to the next thing. And in a way, by doing that, and a lot of times in this life, by being adventurous, then you get to experience multiple life lessons in a single life. And so I really like the fact that, but can I ask just quickly, did you recall being a Tibetan Buddhist or a meditator, a Buddhist meditator in a past life?
I've always known that. I've not done a regression, but I've always known that I was a Tibetan Buddhist monk in a past life. I've just known it. such a fascination with Tibetan Buddhism in my early teens,
Mm.
and I just knew it. I've had it. Certainly, I've had. I mean, I'm always a little bit skeptical about psychics who tell you about your past lives because
Mm.
there's no proof. But certainly, I've been told by more than one gifted psychic clairvoyant that I've had past lives as a monk.
Yeah. So that you didn't, I don't think you wrote that in the book, but that's something
No.
that I thought surely, and I was just sort of curious. I wanted to ask because I explicitly haven't wrote that, but also particularly when I was living in India for a few years with Indian clients. I mean, it'd be weird if someone wasn't a Buddhist monk or a Tibetan monk if they're one of my clients. And
Yeah.
so many of the people that I see, that's, there are patterns in past life regression. People are born as
Yes.
witches, and we see that many times. But meditating monks are just something that comes up so much. But it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean that I have to be a monk again this time. I can take some of those lessons, remember them, but then
Yes.
reconnect with other past lives. So I love the fact you bring up, and so that the shamanic journey you were taking in the sweat
Yeah.
lodge and in the death ceremony. During
Yeah.
that, you recalled also being a past life as a Native American.
Native American. Yeah, yeah. And again, that was in a regression session that I did on myself. Again,
Yeah,
I'm not visual, so I really don't see virtually anything in a regression, but my intuition is very strong and it comes through. And I was in a battle as a Native American, as a brave, and I got tomahawked in the back, in the shoulder while I was fighting
yeah,
hand to hand. Somebody tomahawked. I'd had an injury in this shoulder which I couldn't heal since forever for many years. And when I went into that regression and released it, the shoulder injury just got better. And so I died in that past life. I've also been a Cathar. And one of the reasons why I'm not very keen on Christianity and Roman Catholicism is because I was put to death as a Cathar in a past lifetime. And so, yeah, and also I have a wonderful feeling whenever I go to old monasteries in the UK, these Cistercian monasteries and ruins like that. I just feel very much at home. So I'm pretty
yeah.
sure I've also been a monk over here as well.
Yeah. Okay. So so you're, as that Native American, you're a medicine man. And so
Mm.
that's a kind of esoteric shamanic tradition. But what I'm interested in here is that you make that connection between a physical this life injury and a past life event. And
Yeah,
then at the same time, it seems interweaving with the spirit attachment that's released from your body. It may have had some hooks in. And so,
yeah.
that was a spirit attachment. Did that attach when you were a North American medicine man?
No, I think I actually think I just picked it up by. I believe I picked it up outside the BBC building in Broadcasting House in London, and I was
Okay.
walking past there one day. It just struck me later on that I was pretty down in myself at the time. You know, as we all go through ups and downs, but I wasn't happy with my life, and I think I just picked it up. I think it was just an opportunist basic spirit attachment. It wasn't one of the more difficult ones. It was just an opportunist. And there was I mooching along, feeling cheesed off with myself. And that energy is perfect for it. So then I had it. And I think I had it for a few years, actually, without realizing.
Right. So it's interesting. And so how is it that because there's one thing to go from the hypnotherapy to past lives. It's another leap that a lot of people don't make to
Mhm.
realize that another layer and level that you can unpeel for clients can be spirit attachment. So what was it? Was it that, or was it something else that first brought the possibility of attachments and working with them?
So it was two things that really made me look seriously at spirit attachments. One was clients who would say to me, I think I've got a spirit attachment. And I would do some work to see if I felt there was a spirit attachment. I was making it up. I didn't know what I was doing. And so in the early days, I really wasn't sure whether this was people faking it. You know, oh, well, I don't have to work on my emotional baggage. I'll just pretend I have a spirit which is causing my problems. And then a couple of things happened. One is I read Edith Fiore's book. Edith Fiore, the great American psychologist who fell into spirit release work.
The unquiet
The
death.
Unquiet Dead. The
Yeah.
Unquiet Dead. That's it. And I read that book and I thought, oh, maybe there's something in this. And then I spoke to some hypnotherapy, or certainly one hypnotherapy colleague who'd been specializing in spirit release work for a number of years. And I said, is this real? And he said, this is very real, Burgess. This is very real. I've been doing this. And he was a big man. He was twice the size of me. And I said, but, all these spirits, people are making it up. He says, no, they're not. And he actually used to do house clearances where he'd go to a house which was haunted and he would send the spirits home and clear them away. And he even said that, and he told me, most of the spirits are just lost or a bit hopeless or whatever. Occasionally you'll get one which isn't very nice. And he said he'd even been picked up by a spirit and thrown across the room when he was doing some house clearance work. And I say he was twice the size of me. And I really respected him as a person. I thought, well, if he's saying that, there must be something in this. So I started to look more deeply at it. And of course, it's the old thing, isn't it? Once you put your focus into something, it starts to come your way, that law of radiation and attraction. And I started to see clients who maybe had spirits attached to them. And then, of course, you're then going through a spirit release process and seeing results. That's the thing, seeing them change and get better as a result of letting go of a spirit. So that makes me think and realize there's something very significant going on here that people, again, won't look at and won't give credence to.
Yeah, you had an example in the book, The Adventures of a Hypnotherapist, that I've seen almost word for word. It's like, I had this case study myself, the same, very similar, which was a real issue where they're really facing life and death. So we're talking about a military guy in Afghanistan with PTSD. So that was an amazing story. Can you give us an idea about how that went?
Well, that was another thing. It wasn't one of mine. So this is another thing that also convinced me about the reality of spirit attachments. And my best friend at the time, he was a very spiritual fella, and he started practicing healing, hands-on healing, and he used to go to a healing group, and every Tuesday night they'd meet up in a, spiritualist church, and people would come into the church hall, and there'd 2 or 3 people would sit around or stand around them and channel energy into them. And he used to go there with his girlfriend, who was a practicing medium, a psychic medium. And one evening he was doing his healing bit, and he saw at the back of the hall, there's a young fella was sitting at the back of the room, just watching what was going on. And every now and again, my friend looked at him. I could see that this chap was very nervous and very agitated. And but he didn't come forward for healing. And at the end of the evening, everybody's had their healing experience. So my friend went over to him and he said, do you want to come forward and have some healing? You're welcome. And the fellow said, the young lad said, no, he's about 20 years old or something like that. No. He said, it's okay. I'm just here because I'm very anxious. And so my friend said, well, are you okay? Anything we can do for you? And he said, no, I'm just very, very anxious. He said, I've been like this for a couple of years now. And as he's talking to my friend, my friend's girlfriend came and stood next to him and was listening. And then as this young fella is talking and saying, I've just got this anxiety state and I don't know what to do about it and I'm feeling really crap all the time, all of a sudden, this man's voice came out of his girlfriend's mouth. And he looked round to see that she'd gone into trance. And this voice said, Pete? And the young fella who was talking said, Dave, is that you? And this voice said, yeah, Pete, it's me. Pete, what's happening? Where am I? What's going on? What's going on? Dave, where are you? What are you doing? And my friend's in the middle doing head tennis between this young fella and his girlfriend with this man's voice coming out. And by this time, several other members of the group, the spiritualist group, had come over. And they took over and they said, you're in spirit form. And what had happened is that the young lad, they were both squaddies, they were both in Afghanistan and best friends, and they were involved in a shootout or a firefight. And this young fella got killed immediately. And of course, as we know, sometimes when a person dies in shock, they don't know where they are, they're confused, and he just went and hooked into his best mate. But of course, what his best mate then is feeling is all of his agitation day in, day out. So they knew what to do. They sent him home. They did a gentle bit of work, sent him home. And this young fella's anxiety just drifted away. And then his girlfriend came out of trance. And now my friend was no fool. And when he shared this, I thought there is really something in this. So, and you say you've had a bit very much the same.
Yeah, well, had that happened in this life? So the kid you're talking about, he was a soldier in this life and he'd been in Afghanistan?
Both together. They were both serving together. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
even as you tell that story, it seemed like he recognized his friend's voice as it was being relayed through the channel.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. Absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the experience that I had it was a client very early in my career, one of the first things that exposed me to spirit attachment as well. And he had a past life. We went back to a past life. He was in Afghanistan. This could have been 60, 70 years ago. They've been fighting there, for a long time. And in his past life, he had been the leader of a group. A bomb came in, blew up 5 of his fellow soldiers. He survived in his past life. They all then attached to him in his past life. He then died shortly afterwards and took all 5 with him into this life.
Okay.
And then we went through and released them. But it's just the same thing. Very early in my career, Afghanistan. So soldiers have to face real life and death stuff, and and they have that traumatic quick deaths, and they don't get the benefit of a gentle awakening to the fact that they're dying, etc. It's just bang, and then confusion and grasp onto whatever's there in a panic state.
Yeah, and it's surprising, as we both know, it maybe isn't surprising, how many spirit attachments come from past lives. They come through from past lives and follow our clients.
Yeah.
And so for me, often, if you can clear and release the past life, then it's not just about sending the spirit home, it's about releasing the past life, and then they're more able to let go. And then you can do the work to send them home.
Exactly. And so that's one of those things. If you're doing past life regression, we know we're going to deal with past life death. We have to deal with the past life trauma, but that trauma, that death may involve spirits attaching at the time of death, as our 2 examples both show. Hence, if you're doing past life regression, sooner or later you may be called to do some form of spirit release. And again, it's the whole thing about, I'm afraid to face death or the bad things, but that's just the way to get more light.
Yes.
And so people that sort of have any kind of fear or hesitation about facing entities or attachments, because now that's getting a step too far, and it's what about demons or possession or anything? It's really it's just approaching it with a calmness and I think that's where that non-duality comes in, because I say that in past life regression or therapy, we want to go beyond dual. It's nice to be able to go beyond dualities, but in spirit releasement therapy, it's pretty essential. Because if you're buying in too heavily to the idea of darkness and evil as an existential ultimate reality, then there's a problem. And so we have this thing that there's some darkness exists and we face it, but ultimately there's only light or a transcendent reality that we don't need to be afraid of. We don't need to be afraid to deal with it. And so then we can come into these really challenging sessions with a very peaceful and confident, calm clarity. So I've got one other question, actually, because there was something else that I noticed that stood out to me. Because you say 6 months after I'd done my initial therapy training, I started working with my clients in therapy practice. But I began to realize I didn't know enough to work totally effectively with clients. So I decided to retrain and attended training with Will Proudfoot, and he subsequently became my mentor. I think that's an amazing sentence. Because I see people being overconfident or thinking they know everything. But just like being able to do basic hypnotherapy or do some scripts or a bit of regression is a start. But then clients will call you to do past lives, and then they'll call you to do spirit attachments, and then they'll cause you to deal with all of these things. And you realize, well, my initial training didn't. Why should that be enough to prepare you for a lifelong thing? So lifelong learning and mentorship is amazing. And so when I speak to you as a trainer now, we're fellow trainers, we both train people. How did you have that realization so early? And how do you think it helps you? And how do you what message would you have for the community of healers who may not realize how important that is at whatever stage they're at, probably an earlier stage?
I spent a lot of money in my early years on training courses, on going on training courses, a lot of money, because I just wanted I wanted a tool bag that was effective. So when I first started, I had one tool. I had one induction. That was all. One induction, and that was it. And one technique, which was the scripts. So you just read this stuff at people. And you can train a monkey to do that. That's not therapy. But, and that's not disparaging to monkeys, but anybody can do that. That's not therapy. Therapy is working with the client's inner process. And we all have an inner process. And if that inner process is going over here in the wrong way and it's all chewed up and gnarled, we can do something to open that inner process up and let it become free. But I wanted tools that were effective. So I spent a lot of money. I traveled to the States, did all sorts of stuff. And I was just very fortunate, I think, with the people that I trained with and the tools that I got. I mean, like EFT, for example, the wonderful tapping process, emotional freedom technique. And in the book, I write about possibly my greatest professional career experience with a young child with EFT. And that's not hypnotherapy, but learn as many techniques as you can. And what happens is you then start to develop your own model of working. So it's not about just sort of saying, well, I will be a regression therapist, I will do this. Get a load of tools in your tool bag and you'll develop a model which suits you. And you'll develop maybe a way of working which suits you. But the important thing is have enough tools in that tool bag so that if a client comes and you do plan A and plan A doesn't work, well, you try plan B and then you try plan C. And the more tools you have in your tool bag, it may be that plan A or plan F is what helps them to get better. But if you've only got plan A and that don't work, you're stuffed. So for me, it's about getting out there, learning as many techniques as possible, reading all the books. From a hypnotherapy perspective, because obviously I class myself as a jobbing hypnotherapist. So, I mean, I don't even look upon the work I'm doing as spiritual in a way. For me, this is standard hypnotherapy, past life regression. It's not spiritual therapy, it's regression, it's therapy. So we don't have to give it a different title because for me, I'm a jobbing therapist. So I say to people, learn as hypnotherapists, learn your craft. Learn how to use suggestions, visualizations, then do regression, because that's the most important tool. Do a course in NLP. Now, that doesn't have to be one of these ridiculous year-long courses in NLP. You just want an NLP course that's got a load of good techniques in it, okay? Because NLP has become a religion now, and it has been for many years. But learn NLP techniques. Learn Ericksonian hypnotherapy. Learn how to use Ericksonian language patterns, because we call that conversational hypnosis. And it makes the whole hypnotherapy process so much easier for your clients and for you, because you don't really get any resistant clients anymore, because there's no such thing as resistance. You use it in an indirect way. So, and learn EFT or TFT. I prefer EFT to TFT, but they're both great therapies. For me, those are the things any hypnotherapist should have in their tool bag. With those in your tool bag, you are virtually unstoppable. But the greatest of these is regression.
Well, I couldn't agree more with everything that you said there. I think that's great. And it is that continuing, just being totally effective. So I think people can feel, I don't need to do that. I'm effective with my clients. Or you don't know how more effective you could be. And I love that desire to be totally effective. To be able to be a lifelong professional hypnotherapist for decades is a rare achievement. Is there anything that you would say to people who are wanting to and have decades of success in the world of hypnotherapy and to have adventures in hypnotherapy like you have? Any other advice or words that you'd have for them?
I think it sounds a bit pretentious, but always working with your heart. Always working with your heart, having the client's best intention, best results at the heart of what you're doing. Working with an open heart, working with loving kindness. Because when you are there for the client in that way, the rapport that you're building is very strong and very deep. Because of course, we're doing deep work, as we've said earlier on. It can be scary for the clients, but if they trust you, if they know that you're not there just making a fast buck out of them, you're there to help them to change their lives, and you want to do that. I believe very sincerely in working with my heart as much as possible. And also, there's something I've got into over the years, a habit I've got into. Before every single therapy session, I send out the intention to the universe that I will be able to help this client in whatever way they need help, and that I'll be able to do the work to the standards required. I send that out before. It's like that intention before every single session. So those are just sort of little things that, for me, that I do. But I believe very strongly in. I can't stand the old psychiatrist model, the psychologist model of a flip chart or a tick box and this separation, and you are doing this and I am the boss here. No. We're all human beings. We're all here to help each other. And Richard Strauss, the composer, said, every man is struggling. Everybody's struggling. So when we're aware of that, just work with your heart and things will happen. Magic happens in the therapy room, as we know. As you let the subconscious do the work, magic happens at times. But I think that comes from a very gentle and grounded and loving approach to therapy.
And I think that really speaks to, the humility you have. Let's continue to get as much training as we can. And the intent and desire you have. I really want to do the very best that I can for my people. So there's a lot of love and care involved in the implicit in those statements. And so,
Yes.
so that's wonderful. And so if people are interested in working with you, reading the book, learning more about the work that you do, how can they find you? What can they do next?
Well, my website is steveburgesshypnosis.com. So that's that's the central place. My YouTube channel is Hypno for All, HYPNO, the number 4ALL, Hypno for All. And in that, we've got quite a lot of video interviews with members of my team about regression. I've got 26 audio recordings, hypnotherapy audio recordings, which are there for all sorts of issues. It's my way of giving back to the world, because not everybody can afford to have therapy. So just listening to some of the recordings, it's can help people to feel better. So that's Hypno for All. There's a couple of past life regression videos on there of 2 sessions that I've done with one of my team members. And my Facebook page is The Power of Past Life Regression. And
And the new book, of course, on Amazon?
Yeah, on Amazon. It's already available for pre-order, and Barnes and Noble in the States, and all good booksellers. And published by O Books, and it's wonderful that both of us are having a book published by the same publishers at the same time, within 2 or 3 days of each other.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so I'll have the links to all of those in the description. So on the podcast or YouTube, have a look, click through to the links, and check it out. So thank you so much, Steve. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And it's been a real pleasure, connecting with you, Mark, as well, because I love your book. I think what you're doing is fantastic, and it's nice to meet a fellow professional who knows what he's doing and is good at what he's doing. And so, best of luck with the book as well for you.
Thanks so much. Likewise, yeah. So, The Adventures of a Hypnotherapist, Steve's new book coming out. Really amazing book. With look, there are some things that I wanted to get to, we didn't get time to. If you're interested in aliens, ETs, past lives, witches, the relationships. There are so many patterns that come through in past lives. Incredible case studies you can learn a lot from and be inspired by. So fantastic book. So yeah, so everyone can enjoy reading that one. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you.